So I do want to start with an acknowledgement that the pandemic and other structural inequalities have disproportionately affected people of color, particularly Black and Indigenous peoples. So as members of the UCR community, we stand with Black Lives Matter against racial injustice, police brutality, and other human rights violations. I also want to take this moment to recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Kuya, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, as well as their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. And although we're currently meeting in digital spaces, I do invite you all to learn wherever you're physically located, whose ancestral lands you're located on at the link here on the screen. And especially today, during an election week, I just want to, basically say, we're all experiencing a lot of emotions and anxieties. And for today's workshop, please feel free to engage in any way that you're comfortable. And I am available if you have questions, if you'd like to ask questions later to follow up. So my email is here on the screen. So I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Rachel Starr. I'm the Digital Scholarship Librarian at UCR Library. And so the topic of today's workshop is Advanced Zotero, but we will start with a general refresher. Cover some of the basics for folks who might be newer to using this software for citation management. And then I have a number of topics that we could talk about. We could also spend more time on some than others, depending on what you all are most interested in. So those topics include using Zotero Groups and group libraries for collaboration and making bibliographies with collaborators and other people. We'll talk about searching and some advanced searching in Zotero, kind of magical advanced ways of getting some of your research materials and references into Zotero, in addition to kind of the standard basic ways. And then we can also talk about syncing and file management. One of the biggest questions that I get a lot about using Zotero is, if you're using Zotero on multiple machines, how do I make them talk to each other? How do I get my libraries and file attachments to sync properly? So we can definitely talk about that. But while we're on this screen, I want to launch a poll just to get a sense of the folks in the room, if you are already a current Zotero user. And then of these topics that I have on the screen here, which ones are you most interested in learning about today? We can kind of prioritize the time that we spend today on some of these. We probably don't have enough time to go into 100% depth on all of these. So I'd like to get a sense of how to prioritize. Votes are coming in. All right, it looks like there's an even 50-50 split of current folks. I'm waiting for that last vote maybe. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the polling and share the results. So we have a good even split of folks who are new to Zotero and who have used Zotero before. So I'll keep that in mind as we go through today. And it looks like folks generally do want to spend some time covering some of the basics. Advanced importing and syncing also seem to be high priority topics. So we can actually, Zotero group libraries will take me like just 2 minutes to talk about. So I'll mention that and probably save searching for the end. So we can jump right into those two topics that you all are really, really keen on talking about. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing those results. Yeah, so if anyone would like to, introduce yourself in chat or share the kinds of research materials you're dealing with and needing to do citation management for, of course, if you have any specific questions, share those in chat at any point. I have here on the screen, in addition to, being able to reach out and contact me directly, if you do have questions after this workshop or any other time, you can feel free to reach out directly to me, or on the library website, you can click on Ask a Librarian and submit your questions through there, and someone will definitely get back to you. So do please share questions as you have them, and I will try and keep an eye on chat. All right, but now I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and just kind of start with some basic information and background on Zotero. So if you haven't used Zotero before, it is a really fantastic way to help manage your research materials, and in particular, all of those sources and citations that are, really kind of hard to pinned down sometimes right when you're at the project or when you're at the writing stage, right, of trying to figure out, where did I read that thing? So Zotero can make that a lot easier. And if you go to zotero.org and to the download page, you'll see that it's actually kind of a multi-component thing. So depending on what operating system and kind of computer you have, you'll want to download and install some version of the Zotero software on your computer. And in addition to that, to enable easily getting references from online sources into Zotero, you'll want to also install some sort of Zotero connector. So since I'm using Firefox on my computer and I have a Windows PC, Zotero is detecting that and it is giving me these particular links to download. But if you haven't done this yet, I just wanted to call attention to the fact that it is a kind of two-stage process. And you can also access your Zotero library from any device online. So you can always go to zotero.org and log in. So if you create an account, and in fact, you'll need to create an account if you want to do some of the syncing and advanced, Zotero Groups, some of the things that we'll talk about today, you will want to have an account. So go ahead and do that, it's free. And that will enable you to kind of sign in from different devices on different machines and sync up your libraries that way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and look over at my local Zotero instance. Again, this might look a little different for you if you have a different sort of operating system or device. So basically, I kind of want to start by demystifying this interface if it's new to you. So when you open up Zotero, we're basically looking at three different panes. So the pane here on the left is called the Libraries and Collections pane. So everyone gets one library, and that looks kind of like a file box. That's the icon there. And then you can have an unlimited number of collections, which is what Zotero calls folders. So you can have as many folders as you want. You can nest these folders and create really, easy to find, or, for you maybe to navigate, your nested research materials for different topics or projects or things like that. But everyone only gets one library. But you can have, you can be a member of group libraries, which appear here on the bottom part of this, this screen. I'm getting a notification from my system that my audio quality might not be great. And I've been having issues with the microphone on this computer. So if anyone is having trouble hearing me, or if my audio sounds weird, if you could let me know that in chat and I can try and address that. Hopefully it's not, looks good. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up. All right, I'll keep going. Let me know if the audio gets bad at any stage. So yeah, your libraries and collections appear here and you can easily reorganize stuff. Then here in the center pane, this is where all of your items display. So it's really a lot like a kind of iTunes interface. I'm not sure if that's actually an outdated reference. People still use iTunes, I don't know. So all of the different, books and articles and things that you've collected into your library will appear here. And then if you click on any of those, over on the right-hand side, you will see this item details pane. So this is where all of those different pieces of information that make up your citations will appear, and you can also, add to them and, customize them and fix mistakes, if you're automatically importing stuff, all over here in the item details pane. Also on this right-hand side, you'll notice that there are other tabs. So in addition to citation info, you can add notes. Some of these should have notes. Let me see if I can find some that have notes. Yeah, so notes are just like sticky notes, just text notes that you can add to your citations, include whatever you want in there. Uh-oh. All right, we're good. You can also add tags to citations and organize them. So actually what you just saw me do down here was click on a tag, and that just subsetted. It showed me only the references in my library that have that tag on there. And I use the notes, a tag called notes, to tell me these are all the books and chapters I've taken notes on. So I'll uncheck that. And this is all the materials in my library. So yes. So yep, info, notes, and tags, and then related items. We won't get really into that. That's kind of a lesser used feature, but you basically link items in another way. If you don't want to use tags to link items, you can note that they're related to each other. For example, books and book reviews, things like that. All right, I'm going to go over here into this new collection that I created for today and talk a bit about importing items in the kind of standard basic ways. So the very simplest way to bring references into Zotero is to use this green plus new item button. This is also probably your last resort. You don't want to be adding and spending so much time adding things manually into Zotero when the browser plugin really enables this to be automated and makes it a lot easier and faster to bring things in. But if you want to create things manually, you can. You can choose what kind of item you want and create that new item with that button. It's really easy, and then you just add in all the details. But again, there are other ways of bringing items in, and I'll just showcase the main way really briefly. So say you are searching for research materials in something like the library catalog, and you have your browser plugin installed. It's going to have a little icon up here in the browser bar. So because I'm on a page of search results that has a listing of results, that Zotero icon is actually a folder. So if I click on that folder, it will give me the option to select and import multiple things at once. So you might imagine this is a really quick way to get lots of citations as you're searching for things or doing research into Zotero all at once. So if I just select a couple of these, doesn't really matter, and I'll bring those in, and you'll see this is the browser interface. It will let you customize where you're saving things to right here if you want. You can even add tags right as you're saving them. But I'm just going to hit done and then go back over. And now those, oh good. I was hoping to get things of different item types. So now those citations are in my library, in the collection that I was navigated to. So we can even see here that the different item types have different icons. This one even, it actually grabbed the PDF, which is awesome, of this book, question mark, not sure. Books don't always have PDFs, so that's throwing me off. It might be a book with a PDF, very cool. All right, so that is the most simple and straightforward way to import items into Zotero. And as I said, we can talk about some more advanced ways. I'll go ahead and show one of them right now. So one of the advanced ways, if you happen to know an item's unique identifier, like the ISBN for books, or a DOI, a digital object identifier, or archive IDs, anything like that, you can just put that information in here, and Zotero will go and search and find that, that reference for you. So for instance, I'll just go ahead and copy this ISBN here from this book that I found in the library catalog. And we know we found it in the library catalog that has this UCR URL down here. And I'm going to use this magic wand and hit enter. So I just pasted in that ISBN. And now you'll see we have a second version of this book, this citation, in the folder here. And it actually, Zotero went and looked in WorldCat, so it's a different library catalog that it retrieved this information from. So it even has slightly different information than the library catalog had. And this is something that you'll want to note too. In one version, these two individuals are listed as authors, co-authors, but in this version, one's an author, one's a contributor. So this is just a note to say, Zotero, depending on the quality of the repository or the places it's getting its information from, you'll always want to double check that it's pulling in information correctly, and you might want to tweak this information, make sure it's accurate. But generally, that's a really fantastic resource if you know the item's identifier. All right, I'll talk really briefly about Zotero Groups, and then maybe we'll look at those other advanced ways of pulling information in. So this is, if you go to the main Zotero website, you can just go to the Groups tab. So that's where I am. over here, and I'm logged in, so it's actually showing me all of the groups that I'm a member of. So you can, in this groups section of the website, you can search for groups if you're looking for bibliographies that other researchers and students and people are just creating. You can also create new groups for you and your collaborators if you have a new project, or different kinds of, if you want to use one for a class or things like that. So these are all different groups that I'm a part of, and in fact, and so each group has a group library, and you can view the group libraries. Let's see one that's public. You can view the group libraries online. So this is a great way to kind of share out bibliographies with other people. So you can view the kind of online version of the Zotero library. So you can see it's a very similar interface to the desktop version of Zotero, although it's a little bit different. So you can, again, see different, it's got the 3 panes again, folders, or the, libraries and collections, items here, and then all the item details over here. So I'm going to actually exit out of this. It's generally not a good idea to have an online version of Zotero open and a desktop version of Zotero open. It can confuse the browser plugin as I try to save things. So I'm just going to exit out of that. So that's what it looks like to search for and be part of groups. I highly recommend. Oh, I got logged out. That's all right. I highly recommend exploring Zotero Groups, and you'll see that although I am a member of many groups, I only have 4 group libraries on my current computer. So you can kind of customize which group libraries you want to sync. And we're actually going to be going in here into Zotero Preferences a lot today. So this is something good to know about. You go to Edit and then Preferences, and we'll spend a lot of time in here. I just saw the question in chat about is this second version of the book that I had brought in only a citation entry, or does it also link to the PDF book? So it does not link to the PDF. So this PDF is only associated with this citation. But, and that's a great question, these are identical. They're identical citations in theory, right? So what Zotero will usually find and flag those and say, I think you have 2 versions of the same item in here. So if you go to duplicate items, yep, so Zotero notice that these are the same thing. And it will ask me, do I want to, to merge these 2 items? And in that case, once I merge them, it will keep the PDF if I select this first one as the primary item. And then you can also choose to keep particular fields from additional versions of that item. I'm just going to keep the first item. So I'll hit merge. And if I go back in here, we'll see just one version that's associated with the PDF. So great question. All right, sorry, I was looking at Zotero Preferences. So we're going to spend a lot of time in this little window here. So for Zotero Groups, you want to go over to the Sync tab. And of course, to do any kind of library syncing or syncing of group libraries, you have to have an account and be logged in. And you can only ever link one Zotero instance with one account. So that is just, it's best practice just to have one account to use for all these different things. And then you can choose which libraries you want to sync. So I currently only have a couple of my group libraries selected, and these others I could turn on and off if I wanted to sync them. So that's what you do to get your group libraries onto your own computer or different devices. Okay. Something to note about group libraries and Zotero Storage in general, which we'll talk about more when we get to the syncing part of today. But in general, when you sign up for a Zotero account, Zotero gives everybody 300 megabytes of free storage. So when I have PDF files or image files or really any kind of file that's attached to my citations, and if I sync that, then that's going to count against my Zotero storage. And we'll talk about alternates to using Zotero storage for your files in a little bit. But I just wanted to call attention to that. You get 300 megabytes of free storage, but you can have unlimited data storage. So data storage is just all of basically your citation library. So all of this information here, all of my notes, all the tags, everything that's not literally a file attachment, that's a PDF or an image or something like that, that syncs for free. You don't have to worry about hitting any kind of like limit in terms of how big your Zotero libraries get. And we'll talk more about the difference between data and file syncing later. But I think that's everything I wanted to say about groups. If folks have questions about groups or group libraries, feel free to ask them in the chat. And yeah, let's go ahead and start. We'll dive into some other magical ways of getting existing reference libraries or materials into Zotero. So option number one is to import PDFs and automatically retrieve PDF metadata. So that is something that Zotero will do for you. So let me demonstrate that. I'll go back in here to my example collection. And I have a folder on my desktop with some example PDFs. So there's a couple of different ways you can get PDFs into Zotero. And we actually go into this in some detail in one of the past workshops we did earlier this year that I'll share the link to later. So you can drag and drop PDFs. I can just grab this PDF if I want and pull it in here, and Zotero, which you just saw happen really fast, I can do it again because that was kind of like a very, very quick action that happened. It took this PDF with this file name and it went and looked for it. It looked for the metadata that was associated with this PDF and it found some of it. So this is a journal article. If we actually open up this PDF, we'll see that there is additional information, such as the book title. So it's not actually an article, it's a chapter in a book. And Zotero didn't get this information. It just got some of the basic information that was associated with this PDF. So it didn't grab, the book title or things like that. So this is what I meant too about, double checking that the metadata is correct and maybe updating it after you've imported something. But it's a starting point. I didn't have to enter any of this information manually. So that's really nice. If you have a large, if you've been kind of collecting PDFs and you have a large, volume of PDF files that you would like to bring in and you don't want to manually enter or have to go and search for each of those references and bring them in using the browser plugin, you can go ahead and give it a shot. Just try copying all of your PDFs in and see what metadata Zotero is able to retrieve automatically, and it might cut down dramatically on the amount of time that you have to spend kind of updating those citations. I'll note that depending on where the PDF came from, if it was something like JSTOR or another academic repository or archive or catalog or database or whatever, you might get more information than other kinds of PDFs. So certain PDFs, Zotero is just not going to know what to do with them, and it won't be able to find the details. So this one, it found a couple of details, not as many as I might have liked, but this one is another article from Johns Hopkins Project Muse database. And this one, yes. So this PDF, Zotero was actually able to find pretty much all of the information. And that mostly has to do with where the PDF came from and how it was created and all of that. So this PDF had a lot of embedded metadata that Zotero was able to find and grab and import. So you can customize, again, do I have it open? No. So we'll go back into preferences. You can customize some of the options for what happens when Zotero brings PDFs in. So the first thing I want to call attention to is if you don't, so by default, this will be checked. You don't really need to worry about it. But if for some reason Zotero's not, finding any metadata as you're bringing PDFs in, double check that this is that this checkbox under general is checked. It has to be checked for Zotero to actually retrieve the metadata for PDFs. And this is another one I want to call attention to. Automatically rename attachment files using parent, meaning the citations, metadata. So you notice these are the file names of the PDFs that I just brought in. And these are the file names that Zotero gave the PDFs based on the parent item, the citation it's attached to. So if you want to if you like the file names that you have in your current organizational system, and you don't want Zotero to overwrite those file names when you bring them in, you can uncheck that box in the preferences. All right, let's see. There are additional ways to bring PDFs into Zotero, in addition to dragging and dropping. You can use this green plus sign to actually store a copy of the file. So that's what's happening when I'm dragging and dropping PDFs in. That's storing a copy of the file wherever Zotero is installed on your computer. You can also link to files. So linking to files is going to become really important when you want to sync your file attachments across multiple devices. You have a couple of options with that. You can use Zotero Storage. Again, if you bump up against that 300 megabyte limit when you're bringing a bunch of PDFs in and trying to sync those PDFs, you can either buy additional storage from Zotero, and there's some other options we can talk about. But linking to files is another great way to maintain consistency across Zotero libraries on multiple devices, because you can link. So say I have my Zotero on my laptop here, but I also have Zotero installed on my work computer or another device, a computer at someone else's house. And I want them to both point to places like Google Drive or Dropbox or other places where I have my research files stored. Then you're going to want to use link to file, because then you can tell Zotero, look to that location for these PDFs, but don't try and pull in and store a copy of it locally. So that's what we're going to do. You can link to files even locally though. So say I have these files on my desktop, I'm going to link to this one and pull it in. Zotero is going to look, nothing happens. So I'm going to try and retrieve metadata for this PDF. I don't think it's going to find, they didn't find anything because this is a kind of like a worksheet, a database checklist. It's not an article where it can just easily find something by the name of the PDF. So you'll notice here there's this little link icon. So this is different than this PDF, which is now stored in Zotero's storage. This is just linked to. So if, for instance, I move or delete this PDF file on my desktop, I'll just go ahead and delete it. And now I try and open up the PDF from inside Zotero, I'll get this error saying the attached file can't be found. And that is because we just linked to the file. We didn't store a copy of it. So if the original file moves or changes, then it's gone. Zotero can't find it again. And we'll talk in a bit about how to get around that with something called the linked attachment base directory. But before we do that, I just want to keep talking a little bit more about some of those other magical ways that you can automatically import things into Zotero to make your life a little easier. So say you don't have PDFs and you're not trying to bring in citations based on PDFs. If you just have a plain text bibliography, you have the works cited section of a research paper or somebody else's research paper, and you just have those written out citations, rather than manually entering them or again searching for them or using even the magic wand, which is a little faster, there is a kind of magical tool called Anystyleio, and this is recommended by Zotero. This is a tool that will let you copy and paste and parse those academic references really fast, and it's quite good. So I have an example bibliography that we can look at. It would open on a different screen. Okay, so this is my sample bibliography. It's just a bunch of written out citations. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it here into Anystyleio. All right, so it says it's going to try and parse these 6 references. So I'll click on that button. And so what it does is it essentially goes through and it breaks all these down into the different metadata pieces, that make up the citation. So you will want to take a moment to look through here and make sure it's parsing things correctly. It generally does a really great job, but sometimes, especially for, I found for non-English, citation titles and things like that, it sometimes gets things mixed up. So for example, for this one, this is actually the title of the book, right? So what you can do is select the thing that's wrong. So in this case, I'm going to actually select all of these. So I'm using Shift click. You could also use Control or Command click on a Mac to highlight all of these. And I'm actually going to assign the label title. So now that just said, you parsed that wrong, parse this as the title instead. So we can just scroll through and look and see if it's doing anything else wrong. Looks all right. So for this is I could leave it just as the URL. So basically these are all the little metadata pieces that, Zotero is going to import automatically. So this is a good opportunity if you do want to change any of these. I'm going to change this from URL to DOI because I want that to be stored as a DOI in Zotero. There's the second page. That looks good. All right, so once you've double checked, then you can go ahead and click save. You have a couple of options for exporting this. I recommend BibTeX. BibTeX is the best option for getting different bibliography styles into Zotero. You could also use the CSL JSON version, but I'm going to go ahead and save this as a BibTeX file. All right, I'm going to just save it. It's going to go to my desktop. So now I can go back to Zotero, and I'm going to import that file that I just created using Anystyleio. So when you try and import, it's going to ask, what are you trying to import from? So I'm going to grab that bib file, open it, and then you get some options. I'm going to let it put those items in a new collection, and then I'll put them where I want them. And then if there are attached files, this doesn't matter for the bibliography we just generated, but sometimes, if you're bringing in like an EndNote library, there might actually be files. You can choose whether you use the Zotero Storage or if you're just linking to them. Again, linking if you want those things to permanently live where they are. All right, so I'm gonna hit next. It's gonna bring them in. And now we automatically have all of these citations as they were written out in that plain text bibliography. So that, to me, is one of the more magical ways, something I only learned about recently, so I'm really excited to share it with you. Again, it is anystyleio. So that can be really handy for cases where you're not trying to bring in like PDFs. Are there any questions so far? I'm gonna take a break and look at chat. I haven't personally, so someone asked if this works on a variety of different kinds of computers, such as Chromebooks. I believe you can run Zotero on a Chromebook. You can also, if you ever encounter issues with any kind of device that you're using where Zotero is not running very well, you can just use Zotero in the cloud. So you can always just use it from any device as a browser-based software, essentially. So it logged me out. I'll log back. So this is going to pull up my library. So you can always use this no matter what kind of computer you're on, but I believe it works all right on Chromebooks. Any other questions about things we've looked at so far, such as those alternate ways of getting materials into Zotero? All right, in that case, let's move on and talk about syncing in a little more detail, because that seemed to also be an interest topic to most of you all. So the very first thing I want to call attention to, and I'm actually going to go over here to the Zotero documentation help pages, because these are a really fantastic resource. So this is zotero.org/support, or you just click on the documentation tab. So they actually have a really fantastic kind of help page on syncing that I'm just going to point to and kind of walk through, because this is, I think, the best way to explain it. So the very first thing, I'll reiterate, is that there is a difference between data syncing and file syncing, right? So data is, again, your library. It's all of this information. It's all of the tags that you've added. It's all of the notes that you've added to different things, all of this, text and all of this data. Literally everything that's not a file attachment counts as data, and that there's no limit to that. You can sync as much of that as you want for free using Zotero syncing. And again, the only thing that you have to do if you have Zotero installed in multiple places and you want to sync those libraries is go into your preferences and just make sure under sync that you're logged in. and that you have the library selected that you want to, sync across devices. So that's really simple. So that's for data syncing. File syncing is where it usually gets a little bit more complicated, a little trickier. So if you do want to use Zotero to sync things like PDFs or image files or any other kind of file attachments across multiple devices and multiple libraries, you have a couple of options. So you can sync attachment files using Zotero Storage. Again, you have only 300 megabytes for free, and then you have to pay for extra storage if you do use that option. You can also use what's called WebDAV services. So WebDAV services, if I clicked on that, I'd have to enter in, the name of the service and then my account information. It's essentially a third-party service that you can sign up for, they offer, free and paid additional kind of like Google Drive or Dropbox or Box, other additional online storage options. So they do have a list here of recommended WebDAV services if you're interested in this. It's a third-party thing. Again, it's not kind of supported necessarily through Zotero, but there are certain WebDAV services that offer a decent amount of free space. So it's worth investigating if you have, research projects or labs or things that you do need additional storage, and for some reason you don't want to use something like Google Drive or UCR's institutional storage. But it is actually possible to use Google Drive. This is a kind of more complicated way of using Google Drive. The recommended way of using Google Drive or Dropbox or other methods of storing, your research files is to use, again, linked file attachments. So rather than dragging and dropping or storing a copy of your research files in Zotero Storage or WebDAV Storage, you can, again, just choose to link to those files wherever they live in your cloud drive. What's really important is that if you try to do this option, and this is where I think a lot of folks hit, issues or run into trouble, is that Zotero gets confused because of pathing. So if you're kind of familiar with how computers and operating systems and like file systems work, any file is located at a particular path. So if I go back in here and just find this, I have a PDF. So if I view this, nope, I don't want to do that. I want to, that's small. I want to just okay. So this file is located in my Zotero storage at this particular path, right? C drive, users, Rachel, Zotero, storage, this other subfolder. So that is what's called an absolute path. Zotero is going to look for this PDF anytime I try and open it at that absolute path. The way to get around, syncing issues when, okay, I'm sorry. I just saw in chat that I was cut off and now I'm back. I believe my computer froze. So I'll back up a second. I was just talking about file paths. So if I look again at, any file on your computer, I was just calling attention to the fact that Zotero is always going to look for this particular PDF at this particular absolute path because it's stored there. And that's what you want to get around by using linked attachments versus stored attachments. So this one's linked, you can tell because of the little link icon. And you use linked attachments by selecting link to file versus store copy of file. And say, for example, you want to use Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever to store all your PDFs, but then also associate those PDFs with your citations in here to make it easier for you to find as you're doing research and all of that. You're going to want to set up what's called the linked. I don't want to get the name wrong. Linked attachment base directory. All right. So if we go back here into our preferences again, and we look at under advanced and under files and folders, this is where we can do this. So rather than saying Zotero, look at this absolute path, for that PDF, every time I open up, Zotero, I want you to look there for that PDF. you can specify a place that Zotero should start looking for linked stuff. You can specify that as, for example, if you had, OneDrive. I don't actually have Google Drive installed on this computer, so I can't demo that. But if you had Google Drive, file syncing set up on your own computer, you could select your, users, your name, Google Drive folder on this PC as the base directory. And then if your linked files are in that folder, Zotero will never have trouble finding them. And then what you would want to do is to make sure on every other device, right? Because this is all to make sure that you can access those files through Zotero on any device. So on my laptop, I would set up this linked attachment base directory. And then on my work computer, I'd go in and do the same thing in Zotero. But it's important to do it separately on each of those devices because file paths can be weird depending on your operating system, depending on like software versions. So sometimes, your file path uses forward slashes and sometimes it uses backslashes. All of that can basically break the link and make it impossible for Zotero to find things. So basically you just need to, for each instance of Zotero that you have installed, go in here and set up your linked attachment base directory. If you want to use Google Drive or even something like an external hard drive. Some people do keep their entire, research repository, all their PDFs and images and things on like an external hard drive, and they just plug it in when they need it. And as long as it's plugged in and Zotero knows where to look, it can find those files if they're linked in here like that. That's a little confusing. So are there any questions about pathing, about using linked attachments as a way to sync across devices? Any other general questions about this or the other topics we've talked about so far today? If not, I can jump and look a little bit at advanced searching, if that's of interest to folks. Oh, one thing I do want to make sure to say. We talked about the difference between syncing your data, right? Syncing your Zotero libraries and syncing files. And it's totally fine to have your files like PDFs live in Google Drive or in some other cloud storage, but you never want to install Zotero or have your Zotero library, your actual data directory, where all your citations and stuff are stored. You don't want that to be on an external hard drive or a cloud drive because that data will be very easily get corrupted for various reasons. Yes, it was Anystyleio. Thanks, Esther, for answering that in the chat. This is the website, Anystyleio. Yeah, so just make sure you have Zotero installed somewhere that's not a cloud drive or a virtual drive or an external drive, because that will very easily corrupt things if your data directory is on one of those places. But it's totally fine to use those places for file attachments. Question about how much space the Zotero library takes up. That's a great question. Let's find out. Nope, that's not the Zotero file. All right, so Zotero on my computer is in here. So this is the actual SQLite file, and it is 23 megabytes. So really, it's not huge. I have a fairly chunky library, but it's such small data, right? It's just text data essentially. So yeah, my library is 23 megabytes, which is not very large. But that's not including any additional files or attachments. That's just the data itself, like these citations. Great question.
So I just wanted to ask, do you have any images or video or anything else that's not text-based in your library?
So that would count as file attachments, right? So that's not going to be reflected in the actual size of the library file. So that's only the citation data. I am not using Zotero Storage as my syncing solution because images and PDFs take up so much space. So it's a great question. if I had synced everything, it would be enormous. It would be gigabytes of PDF data, right? So that's why it's important to kind of be strategic about where your files are stored versus where, just your data library is stored. That said, I do use I use Zotero to store stuff, and I don't use Zotero file storage to sync because I would hit that 300 megabyte cap really easily. But I'm not too worried. I mean, about having a couple of gigs of PDFs in my, on my local hard drive. It is important to note, though, if say you drag and drop a lot of PDFs in, and you have those PDFs, on your hard drive, and then you copy them into Zotero, you're going to be storing 2 copies of that PDF. So that can get kind of big, kind of fast. So it's a great question. Did that make sense? My answer?
It does. Do you use Dropbox or a cloud?
I personally don't use those solutions, but I know a lot of people do use Google Drive to store PDFs. And that's primarily because I work on one computer at a time. If I'm doing a writing project, I primarily just have access to those PDFs, and that's my working style. But I know a lot of folks do have a lab computer, and then they have their home computer or maybe a laptop, and they need to access this, those research files or images or PDFs or whatever. And this is a great way to have them all stored in one cloud location, and then you can kind of Zotero knows where to look for them if you set up that linked attachment. All right, so in the last couple of minutes, let's look really quickly at searching. Some folks did say they were interested in that topic. There's a couple of different ways that you can search in Zotero. So up here in I'm actually going to just navigate to my full library to make it a little easier. So this is the primary search bar in Zotero. And if you see this little, if you click on the little drop-down arrow in here, you can change the scope of your search. So let's start at the kind of highest level, and then we'll narrow it down in and talk about how to create really customized searches. So search everything is what it sounds like. It will search all of the metadata fields for your citations. It will search in tags. It will search in notes. And it will also, what's really important about the everything search is that it will search in full text indexed PDFs. So this PDF, I just clicked on a random PDF in my library. And in fact, I know that most of these PDFs are not on this computer because this is a new computer, so I haven't synced them. So if I were to try and open this, it wouldn't be able to find it. But pretend it, is here on the computer. It's not indexed though. So that means that my everything search is not going to look at the words in this PDF file, but the text in here. You can set up PDF indexing, again, back in your preferences. I believe it's under general. Is it under general? Is it under sync? All right. I'm missing it. Search tab, it's on the search tab. All right, so this is where you can set up, so if you can see here, so for my library, 153 items, probably PDFs, are indexed, which means when I search in everything, it will look at the text inside of those PDFs. Some are partially, and then the vast majority of the PDFs that are linked in my library are not currently indexed. So you can always try and index, you can kind of customize this a little bit so that when you do, if that's a feature that you want to exploit as you're doing your research, it's especially helpful if you have, journal article PDFs in here and you're like, where did I read that line about that one person? You can use Zotero's everything search and it will look right in the PDFs, which is pretty fantastic. You also have, you can bulk index everything. It will take a little while. It'll take, depending on your processing power. But yeah, you can, when you're in the preferences, you can index everything. You can rebuild this index of all the PDFs, so you could do that incrementally. You could do it, as you're bringing things in, however you want to do it. Great question. So yeah, everything searches PDFs as well. The default is just to search all fields and tags. And I find this to be a misleading title because it also searches notes. So really when you're searching for all fields, all these metadata fields and tags, Zotero is also going to search in notes. So I found it super helpful for my research process to, wherever you take your notes, maybe you take your notes in Evernote or in Word or some other, text processor or whatever, wherever you store your notes, it can be really helpful to go ahead and copy and paste them into Zotero. Because then, when you're searching for where did I read that thing, who was talking about that, which source had that particular citation in it, and you search using all fields and tags and notes, it will look in here. It will look, I could search for, let's see, just to show that. So I'm searching for the word study using all fields and tags, which again also searches notes. And here, these things are grayed out because the word study does not occur in the fields here for this source, but the word study does occur in this note. So just wanted to point out, it's also searching the notes. That can be super useful. But say you want to do a more detailed search, you have a couple of options. So Zotero has set up this really specific search scope of title, creator, year. So this is a great, if you just really want to, quickly find something and the word that you're looking for is only in the title, right? So I can search for archaeology. So these are all the sources where archaeology occurs either in the title, date, it would never occur in date, or creator, which is author, usually, field. So that can be super useful. You can search really easily. And not worry about finding that in like your notes or inside of PDFs if you just want to find, you can also search specifically for particular fields, and you do that using an advanced search. And you start an advanced search by clicking on this magnifying glass icon here on the bar. So if you click on this, it'll bring up this advanced search context menu. So this is highly customizable, and I'm happy to answer any questions about this. So you can choose the scope of your search. So you can say, I want to search in my entire library. I want to search just in these group libraries. So I'm going to leave it here for my library. You can actually add multiple search parameters. So if you want to search for all of these things, right, you want to match all of them. So it's the title contains and all of these things. You'll want it to be all, but you can also switch that to any. So it'll find, this is like an or search. So this or that or that. And these are really flexible. So you can search in basically any field, right? So they give you a couple of commonly used ones. I want to find, citations where the date is or is not or is before. So let me see if I can find citations where the date is after 1990. And the title contains or doesn't contain or begins with archaeology. And then let's see, what about maybe the type, location type is a book. I only want, is it type? Is that the field? Item type. Item type is, and it gives you a drop-down list, book. So I only want to find books published after 1990 where the title starts with archaeology. And there are 2 that meet that criteria. Cool. You can also choose which kind of the scale. So, if you have lots of nested folders, right? You can choose whether you only search in the top level folder, so only top level items, or if you're searching again for, I want to find, notes, this is my particular search here will exclude notes because I'm asking for books. But if I remove that and okay, so this found another item. But if you wanted to exclude, notes or things that are attached to citations and only search in the citations, you can show only top level items. One other thing, you can save your searches. So if this is a search that you are probably going to be, performing repeatedly or come back to, or maybe it's really useful for the research you're doing right now or the paper you're writing, you can save the search. And what that does, you got to name it. So this is, let's see, we'll call this title equals archaeology date is greater than 1990. You don't have to be that specific with your search titles. And then what it's going to do is essentially save that search as a new collection. So all the items that match that search will show up as their own little folder here. And you can create as many saved searches as you want. Are there any questions about searching? Or about anything that we've covered today? Or maybe things that I haven't covered. We have a few minutes if you have questions about the kind of basics that I skimmed over at the front. Happy to answer any additional questions. Well, if there aren't any additional questions, thank you all so much for joining us today, for participating. Again, let me go ahead and pull up my contact info. Feel free to send me an email if you have any questions, if things come up later, or you can always go to the library website and ask librarians, submit your questions there. I hope this was helpful. Let me actually share, before you all leave, I'm going to drop the link in the chat here to a very, very short 2-question feedback about this workshop today. If there's additional topics you would like us to offer library workshops on, you can let us know through that survey. And yeah, thank you all again for joining us today.